The night Clara proposed to me, she received a text message from her first love, asking her to come back to him. The very next day, she took back her proposal. "Leo," she said, looking anywhere but at me, "I think we're moving too fast. It's too soon to get married." What she didn't know was that the message wasn't from him at all. It was from my older brother, who had used a spare phone to pretend to be her ex-boyfriend. My brother had never been a fan of Clara, but he knew he couldn't simply tell me to stop loving her. I had been in love with Clara since we were just kids, a fact that was perhaps the most poorly kept secret in our entire neighborhood. Clara herself was well aware of it. We had grown up side by side, the quintessential childhood sweethearts, though she always insisted on calling us just childhood friends. The term sweetheart was, I suppose, a level of intimacy she wasn't comfortable with. For me, Clara was the vibrant, passionate love of my youth, and later, the quiet, bitter disappointment I endured as an adult. The turning point in our story came in the form of a boy named Sam. He was a classmate of ours in high school, and the story that unfolded felt like it was pulled from the script of a generic teen drama. One afternoon, Sam was being cornered by a group of bullies behind the school, and Clara, ever the defender of the underdog, stepped in to help him. From that day on, he became a fixture in our lives. He started walking home from school with us, his jokes and laughter filling the space between us. Gradually, my daily walks home with Clara, which had once been just for the two of us, became a trio. And then, just as slowly, they went back to being for two people again. Only this time I was the one who was excluded. Before I was completely pushed out of the picture, Clara and I had a terrible argument. I finally let everything out, screaming at her about how much I loved her and how incredibly jealous I was. I told her I couldn't stand having Sam around all the time. She just stood there in silence, looking utterly stunned for what felt like an eternity. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were filled with a profound sense of guilt and regret. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've developed feelings for Sam." That was it. I felt something inside me break. I became a twisted, bitter version of myself, and then I was gone from her life. From our sophomore year of high school until the day we graduated from college, Clara and I exchanged not a single word. Our parents remained close friends, of course, which created a simple, unspoken rule for any family gatherings. If she was going to be there, I wouldn't be, and vice versa. The next time we had any real interaction was at the funeral for her parents. They had been in a tragic accident during a trip they took shortly after retiring. A large truck had pulled their car under, and they were both gone before the ambulance could even reach the hospital. I had never seen Clara look so utterly broken. After I paid my respects, I stopped beside her on my way out of the service. "I'm so sorry for your loss," was all I could manage to say. In the days that followed, I was consumed with fear that she would fall into a deep and lasting depression. So I reverted to my old, shameless self, following her around like a devoted puppy until we finally reconnected. She and Sam had broken up during their junior year of college, and his name became a topic we silently agreed never to broach. We finally became a couple on the 1-year anniversary of her parents' death. I had stayed with her as she drank heavily, trying to numb her pain. When I woke up the next morning, we were in bed together, simply holding one another. Nothing more had happened between us, not when we were both that intoxicated. But when she opened her eyes, she looked at me with perfect clarity and said, "Leo, let's be together." I had believed my feelings for her were long buried, but even after 8 years apart, she was still the one wall I couldn't stop myself from running straight into. But the thing about hitting a wall is that you're supposed to turn around and walk away, aren't you? After we got together, Clara treated me incredibly well. She would peel shrimp for me at dinner and meticulously pick the spicy peppers out of my food. She remembered every single anniversary, from our first date to the day we officially became a couple, and she would surprise me with expensive watches and detailed model kits. If I even hinted at a stomachache, she would drop everything at work, deadlines be damned, and rush home to take care of me. The years had shaped her into the perfect partner, but she was no longer the girl I held in my memories. The girl I had fallen in love with was the one who would fiercely compete with me for the last chicken wing at a family barbecue, only to call me a glutton while pushing the entire plate toward me with a grin. The girl I loved was the one who would stand on the sidelines at my track meets and boo loudly, only to be waiting for me at the finish line with a cold bottle of water. The girl I had loved was the Clara who would relentlessly tease me until I was genuinely annoyed, and then immediately do something silly to make me laugh, but she wasn't that person anymore. She was just nice to me. She never tried to get a reaction out of me. She had matured a great deal, but I hadn't been there to witness that journey. I sometimes found myself wondering if she had been this attentive and caring with Sam. She was so adept at peeling shrimp. Had he been the one to teach her that? My own pride prevented me from ever speaking his name, but I couldn't let it go. Sam was like a thorn, embedded deep in my side, one that I could never seem to remove. It drove me mad that our decade-plus of friendship seemed to mean less to her than the 2 months she had known him. My heart ached for the 16-year-old version of myself, the boy who would immediately change his route the moment he saw Clara and Sam walking together in the distance. I used to fantasize about scenarios where Clara would return, begging me to take her back. In these daydreams, I would coolly raise an eyebrow, tell her that I wasn't interested in leftovers, and walk away with a sense of finality. But all those years later, when she actually asked me to be with her, I simply collapsed into her arms. Being with Clara had been my ultimate dream since I was a boy, but when that dream finally became a reality, I wasn't nearly as happy as I had always imagined I would be. Some moments, once they have passed, are gone forever. I wanted to break up with her, but ending something I had carried in my heart for more than 20 years was not an easy task. The words were always lodged in my throat, impossible to speak and impossible to swallow. I knew the truth. I loved Clara, but the Clara I loved was the 15-year-old girl from my past. She was no longer the person I remembered, but she was the only one who could ever be her. Should I let her go? I honestly didn't know. A year into our relationship, Clara proposed to me. It was on her birthday. She had organized a party with all of our mutual friends, and in front of everyone, she presented me with a large bouquet of flowers and a ring box. "Leo," she said, her voice steady, "thank you for always being by my side." She continued, "You know, it's actually harder to get into a relationship with someone you know so well, but I had to tell you how I felt, because from the moment I took your hand, I knew I never wanted to let it go." Then she asked the question, "Leo, will you marry me?" She said so many things about how important I was to her, but she never once uttered the words, "I love you." Still, tears began to stream down my face, and I couldn't stop them. As our friends applauded and cheered, Clara gently wiped my tears away and pulled me into a long, deep hug. I hugged her back, my silent acceptance of her proposal. Neither of us posted about the engagement on social media, but the news spread like a wildfire anyway. My brother heard about it almost immediately and showed up at my apartment that same night. My brother is 5 years older than me, and he had watched both me and Clara grow up. He had never really been part of our circle, though. When we were children, he dismissed us as being childish. When we were teenagers, he thought we were overly dramatic. He never understood why I lost over 10 pounds and developed dark circles under my eyes after Clara and I had our falling out. Back then, he liked to act as if he had all the answers, always lecturing me. "You're at that age where a breakup feels like the end of the world," he'd say. "When you get older, you'll look back and realize the person you thought was the love of your life was actually not that big of a deal. But 8 years later, there I was, running headfirst into that very same wall. When my brother found out that Clara and I were back together, he tried to talk me out of it once. He argued that Clara was just lonely and that I was serving as her emotional lifeline. He insisted it wasn't love. But a lifeline is the most important thing a person can have. If I was already the most important person in her life, what else was there to worry about? After that conversation, my brother stopped trying to change my mind. As the saying goes, you can't reason with a fool in love. But on the night she proposed, he asked me one last time. "Leo, are you absolutely sure you want to marry Clara?" This time I hesitated. The confidence I had when I argued with him a year earlier had vanished. "I don't know," I admitted. "What happened back then? It's like a splinter in my mind. It just keeps poking at me." "Then break up with her," my brother said, his bluntness catching me off guard. "Is that really how you're supposed to give someone advice?" I asked with a bitter laugh. "I haven't said a word for over a year because I wanted you to see it for yourself," he explained. "If you hadn't tried again, she would have always been the one that got away. The one you'd wonder about for the rest of your life. But now you've tried. You know that it doesn't fit. So now you can finally let go without any regrets." But was it really such a bad fit? Clara and I had grown up together. We knew each other's habits, quirks, and preferences inside and out. Our families got along perfectly. And she treated me better than anyone ever had. If you removed love from the equation, she was the perfect match for me. The only thing that truly bothered me was Sam. But how many decent people in the world don't have an ex-partner? Maybe I was just being overly dramatic. When I laid out all of my anxieties for my brother, he sighed softly. He didn't mock me. Instead, his expression grew serious. "If you didn't love Clara at all, then yes, you two would be a perfect match. The problem is, can you actually do that? You talk about being a good match, but from the very beginning, your feelings for each other have been completely unbalanced." I fell silent. He had perfectly articulated the source of all my confusion and pain. Seeing how torn I was, he added, "Why don't you just ask Clara?" "There's no point," I replied. "Love isn't something you can get a straight answer to just by asking." But my brother had another idea. He pulled out a burner phone he kept for odd occasions and sent a text message to Clara. "Heard you're getting married. Congrats." I was about to laugh at how weak his attempt was when Clara's reply came back almost instantly. It consisted of just one word. "Sam." In that moment, I felt all the blood drain from my face. Something inside me snapped. My brother handed the phone to me. "Say whatever you want." I typed and deleted again. It took me a full 15 minutes to finally compose and send the message. Posing as Sam, I asked her, "Can you not get married?" Clara didn't reply that night, but the next morning I saw her pacing back and forth on the sidewalk below my apartment window. I watched her from above for a long time, taking in her anxious movements, her struggle to find the right words. Finally, I called out to her as if nothing was wrong. "Clara, what are you doing down there?" "Leo, can you come down? I need to talk to you." She looked up sharply, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second before darting away, like a child caught doing something they knew was wrong. "Okay," I said softly. I threw on some casual clothes, went downstairs and stood in front of her. She stammered for a while before she could manage a complete sentence. "Leo, I think it's just too soon for us to get married. Our careers are just starting to take off. Maybe we should wait a little while." "When you proposed last night, did you forget what year it is? We're both 28. Is that really too soon?" I asked. "I don't understand." Clara frowned. "I was drunk last night." "So, the bouquet and the diamond ring were just things you did because you were drunk?" I thought I was going to lose my mind again. that I would revert to being that twisted, bitter teenager. But I didn't. I wasn't 16 anymore. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of calm. I even managed to smile. Clara, we can just break up, you know? Break up? That's not what I mean. I told you, once I took your hand, I would never let it go. Then let's get married, I said. After the previous night, I had absolutely no desire to marry her, but I knew she wouldn't agree. I was just being sarcastic. She was already wavering because of a text from Sam. How could she possibly hold my hand with any real conviction? Sure enough, she was silent for a moment before she slowly looked up at me. Leo, let's just take some time to cool off. Cooling off means breaking up, right? I was the one who had suggested it, but she wouldn't accept it coming from me. Leo, I don't want to break up. But I do. Those were the last words I said before I turned around and walked away. Clara didn't follow me. She just called out from behind, Leo, let's talk again when you've calmed down. She didn't even give me a reason for needing to cool off. She was afraid to say it, but I knew. When Clara said she wanted to cool off, she meant she didn't want to talk about marriage anymore. Not that she wanted to stop speaking to me entirely. But after that day, I never replied to her messages or answered her calls. She didn't come looking for me either. The very next day, she flew out of the country on what she described as a business trip. It just so happened to be to the same city where Sam lived. The day she left, she sent me a text. Wait for me to come back. But Sam posted on his social media account, you said you would come. The picture attached was of Clara from behind, pushing a luggage cart through an airport. The jacket she was wearing was the one I had given her for her birthday just a few days before. I didn't have Sam's number, but when my best friend from high school, Mark, showed me the post, I didn't have much of a reaction. I just glanced at it and said calmly, "That's nice." "Don't pretend to be the bigger person in front of me," Mark said. "You're going to make yourself sick. Come on, let's trash talk her together." And so, for the next 3 hours, Mark proceeded to absolutely roast Clara. He didn't repeat a single insult. By the end of it, I was laughing, leaning on his shoulder with my arm around him. "Well, I guess for your sake, there's no way Clara and I could ever get back together now. It would be pretty awkward for you to be my best man after all this. I used to place Clara on a pedestal, second only to my own family. But over the years, that had changed. Mark was far more important to me than she was. Back when Clara and I had our falling out, I didn't have many friends at school. Mark was the one who stepped into my life and filled that void. He ate lunch with me, played basketball with me, studied at the library with me. He did all the things that Clara used to do with me. I couldn't get over Clara right away, but with him around, I didn't completely fall apart. Just as I could never completely let go of Clara, I would never forget how good Mark had been to me. My 16th year, for all its highs and lows, was an indispensable part of my life. And I was so lucky that he had been by my side through all of it. Mark threw his arm around me with a grin. "Looks like I'm going to have to take responsibility for you now," he said, sounding like a protective older brother. By take responsibility, he meant he was going to set me up on some dates. That night, he threw a singles party for me and invited every eligible single woman from his office. "All the best catches from my department are here," he announced. "Take your pick." The way he said it, you'd think he was a king showing off his conquered lands. I put my head in my hands. "Mark, I literally just broke up with someone." "Exactly," he replied. "That's why you need a distraction." "I'm not looking to date right now, and it's not fair to mess with other people's feelings," I tried to reason with him. "Any rebound relationship is either cheating on your ex or using someone new. It's just a scummy thing to do." But I don't know what kind of sales pitch Mark had given them, because a few of the women came over one by one to toast with me and ask for my number. I dodged their advances as best I could, and was about to sneak out when Mark created a group chat on the spot and added me to it. The craziest part was that all the women in the group immediately and dutifully changed their chat names to Bachelorette-1, Bachelorette-2, and so on. Mark, you can't just use your management position to pimp me out like this. Even crazier, Mark snapped a few pictures of the women talking to me, posted them to his social media, and captioned it, "Treating my boy to something good tonight." I knew he was just trying to get a rise out of Clara, but someone who no longer had me in her heart wouldn't read into it anyway. Besides, Clara was probably busy catching up with an old friend. She wouldn't have time to be on her phone. I knew that better than anyone. But the moment I saw Mark's post, I couldn't help but picture how Clara might react. It's hard to just let go of someone you've loved for 20 years. Even though I had no intention of starting a new relationship anytime soon, I put my bag down and sat back in my seat. Right now, being alone was the last thing I needed. Half an hour after Mark's post went up, Clara hadn't reacted at all, but someone else showed up at the address from the post. The moment the private room door was thrown open, I froze for a second. Subconsciously, I was still hoping to see Clara rushing toward me. But she had never rushed for me. Maybe it was because she was always so sure that I loved her. The person who burst into the room was Mark's little sister, Sophie. She did not look happy. In fact, she looked dead serious. "Leo, we're leaving." She didn't bother with hellos. She just grabbed my wrist and started pulling me out of the room. Mark stood up and blocked our path, raising an eyebrow at her. "Sophie, what's your problem?" Sophie had always been the obedient younger sister, but for the first time, she shot back at him. "Mark, can you not push your lifestyle onto Leo?" "What's wrong with my lifestyle? I'm happy, and that's all that matters. What's it to you?" Mark had a very open-minded view of love. He never shed a tear for a woman, though he had no problem drooling on one's arm in his sleep. Most of his exes weren't exactly role models, but the people he invited tonight were his colleagues, people whose character he vouched for. He wouldn't throw me to the wolves. Compared to him, I was a total lightweight. I couldn't handle a woman who was too wild. But here was Sophie, labeling all the women her brother introduced me to as bad news, stepping up to defend my honor. I watched the siblings bicker with a smile, feeling like I was back in high school. Back then, I used to go over to Mark's house on weekends to do homework. Sophie, who was only in middle school at the time, was completely under her brother's thumb, constantly being sent on errands. Mark was smart enough to tutor her, but he had a short fuse and would blow up at the smallest thing, so they were always fighting. Eventually, the task of tutoring Sophie fell to me. She was smart and easy to teach, a sweet and likable kid. As she got older, she dropped the more formal way she addressed me, but we grew even closer. Our bond as strong as the one I had with her brother. They were both my best friends, and they were both trying their best to look out for me. It was hard not to be moved, even as I found the situation amusing. I placed my other hand on Sophie's wrist, signaling for her to let go. "Your brother and I are adults," I told her gently. "We know what we're doing, and these are his colleagues, not bad people. My brother said he was going to find you a girlfriend." Sophie's eyes were fixed on me, intense. I was about to shake my head and say I wasn't in a hurry when she continued. "If they're an option, what about me? Am I—" I'd had a few drinks, but I wasn't drunk. Still, Sophie's words hit me like a ton of bricks, and my brain short-circuited for a second. Mark was the first to react. "No way, Sophie. You have a crush on Leo?" "Yes, I've liked Leo for a long time," she answered without a hint of hesitation, her eyes never leaving my face. Her gaze was soft, full of affection, and my heart skipped a beat. I had always seen her as a kid, even though she had already graduated from college. To me, she was still the same girl from years ago. sometimes sweet and obedient, sometimes playful and mischievous. It wasn't just me either. Mark wouldn't be able to accept this, right? Mark did raise his voice at Sophie, but what he said was, "Then what were you waiting for? If you had told me sooner, I would have helped you steal him away ages ago." Sophie, who had been ready to fight her brother, froze when she heard him. She stared at him, and I did too. So did all of Mark's female colleagues, their eyes now fixed on the three of us. Mark turned to me. "You know my sister inside and out, right? I used to think she liked girls since she hasn't had a boyfriend for so many years. Turns out she was just waiting for you." It was true. Mark and I had actually discussed the possibility that Sophie might be gay. He had read a bunch of novels and real-life stories about same-sex couples and told me, "Leo, man, that's a tough road. If Sophie really does like girls, we have to support her." I had nodded very seriously, promising to always stand by them. And now it turns out I was the reason Sophie had been single all this time? I turned my head in a daze, my eyes meeting Sophie's. She looked at me again, her expression earnest and gentle. "Leo, I've liked you for a very long time, but I knew I couldn't confess until I got into college, so I just studied as hard as I could to catch up to you. But by the time I finally worked up the courage, you had gotten back in touch with Clara. I don't want to wait anymore." "But I've always seen you as a little sister. I've never thought about you that way." "Then start thinking about it now. Unless you plan on dying alone, I am absolutely the most suitable person for you." "Leo, I will be good to you for the rest of my life," Sophie declared. And I knew she meant it. Being confessed to by a good friend. It's impossible not to be moved. But like Clara once said, the closer you are as friends, the harder it is to be together. And until I had completely let go of Clara, I couldn't just take Sophie's hand. I was trying to figure out how to gently turn her down when Mark hit me with a soul-crushing question. "If you were set up on a blind date with someone who had the same qualities as my sister, would you be willing to get to know her? Now be honest." "Yes," I frowned and looked at Sophie, thinking her over from head to toe, inside and out. I honestly couldn't shake my head no. I had watched Sophie grow up. Her upbringing and character were guaranteed. She was a graduate student at one of the top universities in the country, with a bright future ahead of her. And even setting all that aside, with a face like hers, there had to be a line of guys who had fallen for her at first sight. Sophie was, for all intents and purposes, perfect. Instead of trying to find some fault in her, it was better to just be honest. Logically speaking, Clara wasn't the only one who was a good match for me. Sophie might even be better. It was just that emotionally, I couldn't pivot to Sophie so suddenly. Mark snapped his fingers, a huge matchmaker's grin on his face. "Then you two can start getting to know each other again, from scratch." "Okay." Under Sophie's intense gaze, I finally agreed. "You have to move forward in life." I decided to give her and myself a chance to start over. I didn't immediately make things official with Sophie. I just agreed to let her pursue me. We did things like going out to eat together, shopping, and seeing movies. Sophie never rushed me. She gave me plenty of freedom and space. She said she'd waited for me for over a decade. She didn't mind waiting a little longer, as long as she had a ticket in the love line. I'm 4 years older than Sophie. When we were teenagers, that age gap felt like a chasm. But now, 4 years is nothing. Falling for Sophie was the easiest thing in the world, because she was incredible, and she only had eyes for me. Clara's business trip was turning into a long one. She was gone for over 3 months. About 2 weeks into her trip, Mark heard from some other high school friends that Sam had cancer. Late-stage bone cancer, apparently. That night, for the first time since we broke up, I replied to one of Clara's messages. I opened our chat but didn't scroll up. I just replied to her most recent text. She had written, "It's going to take some more time to wrap things up here. I'll definitely be back for your birthday. I replied, It's fine. Focus on your work. I didn't like Sam, but it was a harsh reminder of how unpredictable life is. In the final days of his life, there was no reason for Clara to be distracted by me. If she needed peace of mind, I could give her that. When Mark found out, he called me a saint. Sophie, on the other hand, took my side. Who cares? Let her think that. Then when she comes back, bam, I've already swooped in and won. How pissed would she be? God, that feels good just thinking about it. Mark's eyes lit up, and he and Sophie high-fived. I'm not deaf. You don't have to plot so loudly. I just shook my head, watching the happy siblings. To be honest, that thought hadn't crossed my mind at all. The idea of keeping Clara on the hook just to deliver a fatal blow when she returned, it was pointless. The story between her and me was over the day after her birthday. Wanting to see her regretful and in pain is just a sign that you still care. And I didn't want to care about her anymore. As expected, Clara didn't make it back for my birthday. Not that I was expecting her to. The day before my birthday, Sophie and I flew to the mountains to see the snow. It was coming down heavily that day, blanketing our shoulders in a layer of white. A young couple walking near us was playing in the snow, whispering cheesy romantic things to each other. The girl said, "We've already shared a snowstorm, so I guess that counts as growing old together." The guy moved in, pulled her into a hug, and said something about never regretting their love. Even in the dead of winter, the air was full of youthful energy. I was thinking about how great it is to be young when it belatedly hit me that Sophie was their age. The scenery was perfect. It was the perfect time for a confession. Caught up in the atmosphere, I felt a little flicker of anticipation. I thought it would be hard to get over Clara, but after only 3 months, my heart was slowly making room for Sophie. Her confession in that private room that night was like a switch had been flipped, giving me permission to love her. Once that switch was on, loving her felt like an instinct. When I was with her, I finally felt truly loved. Clara had been good to me in the past, but it always felt a bit forced, not as pure as what I had with Sophie. "Leo," Sophie whispered in my ear, "we're not just going to see the winter snow. We're going to see the spring flowers, visit every beautiful place, and spend the rest of our lives together. That's what it means to grow old together, and you're the only one I want to do that with." I already knew how she felt, but hearing those words, I couldn't stop my eyes from welling up. To keep her from teasing me, I forced down the tears that were about to fall and curved my lips into a smile. "Every beautiful place? The world's a big place, you know. We'll never see it all." "Then that just gives me an excuse to find you in the next life," she said. Her sweet talk was even cheesier than that other girl's, but I was a total sucker for it. The truth is, ever since I was 16, one of my birthday wishes was always for Mark and Sophie. I'd wish for them to be safe, happy, and for all their dreams to come true. This year I gave my wish to Sophie, and let her make it herself. As I blew out the candles, Sophie and I slowly opened our eyes, our gazes locking in an instant. I spoke first. "What did you wish for? Won't it not come true if you say it?" Sophie hesitated, looking a little shy. I coaxed her, "If you're sincere, it'll come true. What does saying it have to do with anything?" I thought she'd say something about wanting to be with me, and then I could swoop in and make her wish come true. But her wish was so simple and pure. "I wish for you to always be safe and healthy." As I was touched by her words, she smiled and added, "I was going to wish for us to be together, but I think I'm close to making that happen on my own. No need to bother the gods." "Do you want to know what I wished for?" I spoke softly, my cheeks slowly turning red. "I wished that you would be the one to spend every birthday with me from now on. Getting together with Sophie was the most natural thing in the world. I was just wishing for that to be extended a little bit, to be with her forever. When Sophie and I got together, we had the blessings of all our friends and family. My parents said, "We remember Sophie from when she used to come over. She seems like a great kid. We were worried you wouldn't be able to move on. Now we can finally relax." My brother said, "You could get married tomorrow for all I care." Mark just hooked his arms around both of ours, cackling like he'd reached the pinnacle of his life. That's when I realized just how bad my last relationship had looked to them. I had always prided myself on being clear-headed, but it wasn't until I was truly loved that I understood I had just been fooling myself all along. Never again. No more deluding myself and no more unfaithful lovers. Clara and I had mutual friends, but at the end of the day, they were her friends first. After we broke up, I barely talked to them. That, combined with the fact that I rarely post on social media, meant that Clara had no idea Sophie and I were together. She just kept feeding me empty promises. She said headquarters was changing her business trip to a year-long transfer, and that we would get married as soon as she got back. She said she couldn't be with me for my birthday this year, but next year she would take time off to go on a trip with me. She said once she had enough experience, she'd start her own business and build the best possible future for us. I usually didn't reply when she went on like this. On the rare occasion I did open her chat, I'd just send back a generic, "Have you eaten?" or "Off work yet?" Clara must have noticed how cold I was being, but there was nothing she could do, because she couldn't let go of Sam. A few times, she said she was coming back to see me, but then she'd get tied up with work at the last minute. Like for my birthday, she had sent me a screenshot of her flight confirmation weeks in advance, but then she bailed. That day, Sam posted a video of Clara playing guitar and singing a sad love song to him. Mark sent me the video right after Sophie and I had made things official. I felt nothing watching it. I wouldn't have gotten together with Sophie if I hadn't completely let go of Clara. Sophie, on the other hand, insisted she sang better than Clara and spent the whole night singing to me. All these years later, I'd finally made peace with it all, with Clara and with Sam. 6 months after we started dating, Sophie finished her master's degree. I was there at her graduation ceremony along with her family. I watched from the audience as she, dressed in her cap and gown and holding a bouquet, walked toward me. I couldn't help but get emotional. As she made her way to me, it was like I was watching that mischievous little girl grow up all over again. Now she was grown up enough to shelter me from the storm. She opened her arms to me, and I stood up to meet her, burying my head in her embrace. "Congratulations on graduating," I said. She replied, "Marry me, Leo." Without any hesitation, I glanced at my watch, then looked up at her and smiled. "Is there still time to go home and get our birth certificates?" "Of course." Sophie's voice was bright, her eyes crinkling with a smile, just like the mischievous girl I first met. She had grown up, but in a way she hadn't. Either way, she had become this soft, irreplaceable part of my heart. She and Mark had become more important to me than Clara long ago. I just hadn't realized it then, hadn't considered the possibility of being with her. Once I did, loving her became as easy as breathing. While Sophie and I were planning our wedding, Clara came back. She looked exhausted. When I went downstairs to meet her, she threw her arms around me, murmuring my name. Leo, I'm back." Mark had already told me that Sam had passed away a week ago. I gently pushed away from her embrace and looked at her calmly. "Clara, I'm sorry for your loss." "Leo?" Clara was shocked, and a flicker of fear crossed her eyes. You knew? Then why didn't you ask me?" "I told you we broke up. Besides, I had sworn to myself when I was 16 that I would never ask her that stupid question again. The one where she had to choose between me and Sam. I didn't agree to it. I said we would get married when I got back. Leo, I'm back now. I'm here. I missed you so much this past year. but you never answered my video calls. I really, really missed you." Clara kept going on about how much she missed me, her expression screaming how much she cared. But I cut her off. "Clara, I'm married." Stunned into silence, Clara just stared at me for a long time, then shook her head, enunciating each word. "That's impossible. Do you know Sophie, Mark's sister? We got our marriage license 2 months ago." "Is this because I went to take care of Sam? Are you trying to get revenge on me? Leo, Sam was dying. Did you really have to compete with him over everything?" Clara's face was a mixture of disbelief and anger. It was the first time she had been angry with me in years. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was more because of me or more because of Sam. If I really wanted to compete with him, I would have used it as leverage the day after you left and forced you to come back. But you were gone for almost a year. Did I ever say anything to you? In fact, when I found out Sam was sick, I even replied to your message because I didn't want you to be worried about me being upset while you were taking care of him. So you do still care about me, don't you? And you were lying about being married, right? Clara's expression softened, and she reached for my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me and met her gaze directly. "Clara, I don't hate you." I didn't even hate her when she took back her proposal. At the time, what I felt was more like relief. I couldn't forget the bitterness of those teenage years, but I also couldn't bring myself to cut ties with her. Her words that day made the decision for me. They cut through all the tangled emotions and worries that had trapped me, and it was like I was a person walking in the dark who finally saw the light. I didn't hate her, so I gave Sam the only bit of kindness I had to offer. I kept her calm for him, so she could be by his side, without worry, as he lived out his final days. After I told her all this, she was still shaking her head and saying she didn't believe me, but the light in her eyes was starting to fade. She said weakly, "I told you that you were the most important person to me. From the moment I decided to be with you, there was no way I would ever get back with Sam. The night I proposed to you, my friend Zoe asked me if I'd been in touch with Sam. That's when she told me he was sick. Sam's parents always favored his brother. They never had a good relationship. When they found out his illness was terminal, they basically wrote him off as dead and never once went to see him. Sam is incredibly stubborn. When he decided to drop everything and go abroad, he cut off all contact with me. He wouldn't have reached out unless he was at his absolute breaking point. That night he sent me that text, asking me if I could not get married." I cut off her explanation. "I sent that text," I said quietly. Clara's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization. Then she murmured, "No wonder. When I called back the next day, no one answered. Leo, if you wanted to know something, you could have just asked me. I would have always chosen you." "You already gave me my answer that day, downstairs from my apartment. Or maybe you had already given me my answer when we were 16. Leo, Sam's situation was just so awful. He was so thin. He was practically a skeleton. I was just going to visit him and then come back. But he was in such a pitiful state. I couldn't bring myself to say I was leaving. So I applied for a transfer to the branch office there so I could work and take care of him at the same time. I wasn't lying to you. I really was working over there. I believe you, but it doesn't have anything to do with me anymore. The truth is, Clara and I missed our chance long before that. Was it when I saw her pacing in front of my building that I no longer wanted to marry her? No. It was the moment my brother asked me if I was sure I wanted to marry her. I never knew how to describe my feelings for Clara, but seeing her again now, a metaphor finally came to mind. You know, to me, you're like a movie with a terrible ending. The first half was incredible. It captivated me, and I was completely invested in it. But then it started to drag. It got boring. It was tasteless. But I couldn't bring myself to just turn it off, and just as I was debating whether to stop watching, someone unplugged the TV for me. But I didn't feel regret. I felt clarity. and I was able to move on and start fresh very quickly. So I don't blame you for going to Sam. In fact, I'm glad you did. No, that's not it. We were so good together. How could you have wanted to give up on me back then? Leo, you say you don't hate me, but you're just saying these things to hurt me. I really am married. If I hadn't moved on from you, how could I have walked into City Hall with someone else? Just before Clara completely lost control, Sophie arrived to pick me up. A month after we got our marriage license, Sophie got pregnant. Today we had an appointment for a prenatal checkup. Sophie walked briskly between us, then turned to me with a gentle smile. It's windy out here. Why were you waiting for me outside? Let's go. She acted as if Clara was nothing but air. Okay. I took Sophie's hand, then turned my head to give Clara a polite smile. We have a doctor's appointment and we're kind of running late, so we won't invite you up. An appointment? Sophie wasn't showing yet, but Clara's eyes drifted down to her stomach, and she took an involuntary step back. She believed me. As I got into the car, Clara was still standing there, frozen like a statue. This time I was the one who left first. Sophie didn't ask me a single thing about Clara. She just took my cold hand in hers, her eyes full of sympathy. Look at you, your hands are freezing. After that day, Clara never contacted me again, but she came to my wedding. She sat at a table in the farthest corner. When I was making the rounds toasting guests, our paths inevitably crossed. From the moment he found out Clara was there, Mark was worried she would get drunk and cause a scene. But she didn't. She drank a lot, and her face was flushed, her eyes red. Clara's words of congratulations were lost in the noise of the reception. I couldn't hear what she said. After we finished the toasts, Sophie told me that Clara wished us a lifetime of happiness together. I smiled faintly and nodded. I figured, a lifetime of happiness. We would have that.